Call on Members' Order of the Day number 4.
Kiwibank Bill, first reading.
I call the Honourable Clayton Cosgrove.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Keep Kiwibank Bill be now read a first time, and I nominate the Finance and Expenditure Committee to consider the bill. Sir, I accept from the outset that there is a major philosophical divide between the major parties of the opposition and that of the government in respect, and the minor party of the government, Mr Seymour, who's been the subject of intense scrutiny tonight, that there is a major divide between us in respect of the retention and or sale of public assets. The bill, sir, is precise and surgical in what it attempts to do. It attempts to protect what is a jewel in the crown of public assets, that is Kiwibank. I note that the history of Kiwibank is one where the incoming Labor government in 1999 promoted the concept and then put it into operation under sustained opposition, I have to say, from the national government, who I think used terms like communism and other things in relation to the establishment of Kiwibank, said it would not work, said it would be an encumbrance to the public purse, and on all counts the then opposition National Party was wrong. On coming into government, the National Party then had a road to Damascus experience and realised that this was a public entity with huge support from the public, not just in a philosophical sense, but in terms of the thousands of customers that lined up to participate in Kiwibank. And I note that the history of Kiwibank in terms of interest rates was it was the first time for many, many decades when a bank occasionally went against the tide and struck an interest rate that was slightly lower than the benchmark of all the other competitors, and in that way actually created some true competition. So the notion of the state having a role, say in a bank or in certain entities, the notion that they shouldn't have a role, that notion was put to asunder, sir. The Kiwibank bill, as I say, seeks to protect Kiwibank as an entity. As Kiwibank is a wholly owned subsidiary of New Zealand Post Group, the board of New Zealand Post Limited could sell all or part of Kiwibank without recourse to Parliament. Now, I acknowledge that the chairman of Kiwibank is one Dr Michael Cullen from my tribe. I know a good man, and I think a good decision by the National Party to appoint him. And I know where Dr Michael Cullen sits on these issues. He sits firmly in the camp, as he did when he was Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy and Finance Minister, in terms of retention of these assets. But that in itself, one man standing alone on the board, would, if the board was packed with National Party cronies, with a mandate to flog it off, one man, doing the Custer's last stand could not prevent that. So this bill, as I say, seeks to put in some basic safeguards. The bill would ensure that any proposal to partly or wholly privatise Kiwibank would require the support of 75% of all members of the House of Representatives, or alternatively from a majority of voters in a referendum, in order to lawfully proceed. And that last provision, I think, seeks to respect the thousands of customers that Kiwibank now has gained and retains and continues to grow. I note with interest that the week this bill was drawn from the ballot, it was very apt. That was the week that finally, and sadly and tragically, Solid Energy came a complete gutser in respect of its future at the hands of national ministers and a national government who saw it like a sinking ship just slide into the sea over many, many years. I remind members of this House of the mixed ownership model and the promise by Prime Minister Key that mixed ownership model would get us $7 to $10 billion. Then that was revised down to $5 to $7 billion, and the actual returns, as we know, were short of $5 billion at $4.7 billion. Now, I would have thought Mr Scott and a few of the other eminent business people over there if they'd forecast that, well, that member talks about economics. If he says that's a good return on assets, when you forecast, for instance, Solid Energy, an export award-winning company, sir, an export award-winning company under a Labor government. In fact, we resurrected it again after the last National government tried to hock it off and drive it into the ground. An export award winner returning solid returns to the taxpayer, which under this government's watch, and I mean watch literally because they watched it under advice, thousands of pages of advice that warned them that things were going wrong, that they were being too expensive, that they could not agree on valuations, that the board believed that what went up would never come down in terms of the coal commodity price, when every other mining company around the world immediately, sir, was circling wagons to protect themselves as their commodity price went down. This government sat there and did nothing, and that asset has absolutely come a gutser. And now, of course, in the week that this bill was drawn, we find out that part of the last remnants to deal with Solid Energy to save a few jobs for a few months or a year or so is to hock off the remaining commercial parts in an asset sale. We also note, sir, that this government has talked about capital recycling. Interesting term. I think they may have authored it or invented it. Certainly they've reinvented it, because now, of course, we know they're looking around for $1 to $2 billion, and that may indeed see, sir, further asset sales going ahead. I just simply don't believe, with respect, sir, the Finance Minister when he said that's it. If that was it, Solid Energy would not have been in the position it was. And I would also say to this House, sir, that despite all the conjecture, the overwhelming public opinion, in every opinion poll that I have seen over the years that's been taken in terms of whether people are in favour or against asset sales, overwhelmingly they are against the sale of assets. I suspect, sir, if you polled people specifically on Kiwibank, there would be a greater than an 87, the last poll I saw, there would be greater than 80 or 90% support in respect of retaining Kiwibank. So this piece of legislation, sir, is straightforward. There is no impost on the Crown. It simply puts another check and another balance in place, so that if in the event that the board decided that they wish to hock off Kiwibank, as they can do legally without any parliamentary intervention or ministerial intervention, it would require, sir, as I say, a 75% majority of this House, or alternatively a referendum. To conclude, where I started, I accept there is a divide, and a philosophical divide, perhaps an ideological divide, in respect of state assets. But I would wager that it would be an extremely dangerous proposition for any government to propose, sir, the sale or disposal of this asset. We've been through a GFC. We don't know, sir, if there is going to be another GFC or if the economy is going to turn again. We don't know. We know that New Zealand Post itself is struggling as a group because of the changes in technology. We know that they're attempting to combat that. The physical mail, in terms of non-parcel mail, is deteriorating. Their books are under, and presumably will continue to be under, a certain pressure as technology moves. That could indeed, sir, provide motivation, or by necessity, the need to hock off and sell a major asset within that group, that is Kiwibank. It would be quite a prize, sir, to sell off. It would presumably, I think, get quite a good and nice price, sir, given its profitability, given its stability, and given its huge growth over the years. This bill, sir, simply seeks to put in safeguards, and if the government is true to its word that it doesn't want to dispose of Kiwibank, I would assume that it would see no reason to stand in the way of this bill, sir, and I urge the House to support it.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. I call David Bennett.
Thank you, Mr.